June 6, 1944, Normandy, France. As American soldiers stormed Omaha Beach, German defenders had every reason to feel confident. They held the high ground. They had months to fortify their positions, and they believed their weapons were superior. But within hours, that confidence would shatter. Not because of tanks, not because of air superiority, but because of a rifle. A rifle the Germans had mocked as too complicated, a rifle they said would jam in the mud and fail in combat. They were wrong. This is the story of the M1 Garand, the weapon that gave American infantry a firepower advantage so devastating it changed the course of World War II. To understand why the M1 Garand was revolutionary, we need to go back to the trenches of World War I. By 1918, military strategists realized something critical. The side that could deliver more accurate fire faster would win infantry engagements. But the rifles of the era, bolt-action designs like the British Lee Enfield and the German Mauser, required soldiers to manually cycle each round. A trained rifleman could fire maybe 15 aimed shots per minute. In the chaos of combat, that number dropped dramatically. Enter John Cantius Garand, a Canadian-born engineer working at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. Throughout the 1920s, Garand worked obsessively on a semi-automatic rifle. His goal was simple but radical. Give every American infantryman the ability to fire as fast as they could pull the trigger without ever touching a bolt. By 1932, after years of testing and refinement, the U.S. Army adopted his design. The M1 Garand became the first semi-automatic rifle issued as standard equipment to infantry forces anywhere in the world. It fired the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge. It held 8 rounds in an internal magazine loaded via an en-bloc clip. It weighed just under 10 pounds. And most importantly, it worked. Meanwhile, Germany was rearming. But their standard infantry rifle was the Karabiner 98K, a bolt-action weapon that was essentially a refined version of the Mauser design from World War I. It was accurate, it was reliable, but it was slow. A German soldier had to manually pull back the bolt after every shot, eject the spent casing, chamber a new round, close the bolt, and re-aim. In the time it took to fire 5 shots, an American with an M1 Garand could fire 15. German military doctrine didn't see this as a problem. They relied on the MG-34 and MG-42 machine guns for suppressive fire, while riflemen provided accuracy and discipline. When German intelligence learned that the Americans were equipping every infantryman with a semi-automatic rifle, many officers were skeptical. Some even laughed. They believed such a weapon would be too complex, too prone to jamming, and too difficult to maintain under battlefield conditions. They were about to learn a hard lesson. November 1942, Operation Torch. American forces invaded North Africa, marking their first major engagement against German troops in World War II. For many young American soldiers, this was their baptism by fire. They were green, untested, and they were about to face the Afrika Korps, some of Germany's most experienced desert fighters. But the Americans had something the Germans didn't expect. Private First Class James Simmons, part of the 1st Infantry Division, later recalled the first firefight near Kasserine Pass. "We were pinned down by a German machine gun nest. I could hear the Kar 98K rifles cracking in the distance, slow, methodical. But when we returned fire, it was like thunder. Our M1s just kept hammering. We didn't have to stop. We didn't have to think. Just aim and squeeze." The psychological effect was immediate. German soldiers, accustomed to the rhythm of bolt-action fire, suddenly found themselves under sustained, accurate, semi-automatic fire from multiple directions.
Intelligence reports captured from German units during the North Africa campaign reveal a grudging respect. One officer wrote that the American infantry rifle is a formidable weapon. Our men are taking casualties before they can effectively return fire. But this was just the beginning. June 6, 1944, D-Day, Omaha Beach. The landing was hell. German MG-42 machine guns tore through the first waves of American infantry. Men drowned in the surf. Bodies piled up on the sand. For hours, it seemed like the invasion might fail. But as small groups of soldiers began to push inland, the M1 Garand proved its worth. Staff Sergeant John Rauch, who survived Omaha Beach, described the weapon's impact. When you're moving through the bocage, those thick hedgerows, you can't see more than 20 feet ahead. The Germans would be dug in, waiting. But the moment we made contact, we could lay down so much fire, so fast, that they couldn't get their heads up. That rifle saved my life a dozen times. In the close quarters fighting of the Norman hedgerows, the M1's rate of fire became a force multiplier. American squads could suppress German positions while maneuvering, something that was far more difficult with bolt-action rifles. German after-action reports from June and July 1944 repeatedly mentioned the overwhelming American firepower at the squad level. One captured Wehrmacht document states that American infantry sections deliver fire equivalent to our own platoon-strength engagements. Casualties among our forward elements are unsustainable. But perhaps the most telling evidence came from German soldiers themselves. Interrogation records reveal that many German infantrymen began targeting American soldiers carrying M1 Garands first, recognizing them as the greatest immediate threat. December 16, 1944, the Ardennes Forest. Hitler launched Germany's last major offensive in the West, the Battle of the Bulge. Temperatures plummeted below zero. Snow fell in blizzards, and the Germans threw everything they had at thinly stretched American lines. This was the moment when the M1 Garand faced its ultimate test. Critics had always said semi-automatic rifles would fail in extreme conditions, that they'd freeze, that they'd jam, that soldiers would be left defenseless. But the M1 Garand did something remarkable. It kept working. Sergeant Francis Curry, who earned the Medal of Honor during the battle, later said his rifle never quit on him, not once. I cleaned it when I could, but there were times I didn't touch it for 3 days. Mud, snow, blood, it didn't matter. When I pulled that trigger, it fired. At the Siege of Bastogne, surrounded 101st Airborne paratroopers relied on their M1s to hold off repeated German assaults. The rifle's reliability in sub-zero temperatures became legendary. Meanwhile, German Kar 98K rifles, while also reliable, couldn't match the sheer volume of fire. In defensive positions, American soldiers could hold off German attacks with half the manpower that would have been required with bolt-action weapons. A German officer captured at Bastogne was quoted as saying, "They could not get close. Every time we advanced, the fire was continuous. We thought we were facing machine guns, but it was their rifles. Just their rifles." By January 1945, the German offensive had collapsed. The Wehrmacht had lost over 100,000 men. And among the lessons learned, attacking American infantry positions head-on was suicide. While the M1 Garand was proving itself in Europe, it was simultaneously revolutionizing combat in the Pacific. Here, the challenges were different. Humidity, rust, dense jungle, and an enemy that specialized in close-quarters ambushes and nighttime infiltration tactics. The Japanese Type 99 rifle was a bolt-action weapon, similar in concept to the German Kar 98K. Japanese doctrine emphasized marksmanship, discipline, and aggressive infantry tactics, particularly bayonet charges. But when Japanese soldiers encountered Marines armed with M1 Garands, the results were devastating. Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone, Medal of Honor at Guadalcanal, described the weapon's impact. When the Japanese charged at night, you didn't have time to think. You just fired. The M1 let you put 8 rounds downrange in seconds. It stopped banzai charges cold. The M1's semi-automatic capability was particularly valuable during the island-hopping campaigns. At Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, Marines faced entrenched Japanese defenders in bunkers, caves, and fortified positions. The ability to deliver rapid, accurate fire while advancing under fire gave American forces a critical advantage. One Marine Corps after-action report from Iwo Jima noted that the M1 rifle has proven indispensable in reducing enemy strongpoints. Suppressive fire from riflemen allows assault teams to close with grenades and flamethrowers. Even in the humid, corrosive environment of the South Pacific,
the M1 Garand maintained its reputation for reliability. Armorers noted that with basic maintenance, the rifle continued to function even after months of jungle combat. By the end of the war, Japanese intelligence reports acknowledged what German reports had already concluded. American infantry possessed a significant firepower advantage at the individual soldier level. So, what made the M1 Garand work when so many other semi-automatic designs failed? The answer lies in John Garand's elegant engineering solution, the gas-operated rotating bolt system. Here's how it worked. When a round was fired, hot propellant gases traveled down the barrel behind the bullet. A small port near the muzzle diverted some of that gas into a cylinder beneath the barrel. This gas pushed a piston backward, which rotated and unlocked the bolt, extracted the spent casing, cocked the hammer, and chambered a new round from the clip. All of this happened in a fraction of a second, automatically. The genius was in the simplicity. Fewer moving parts meant fewer points of failure. The rotating bolt provided a strong lockup that could handle the powerful .30-06 cartridge, and the gas system was self-regulating. It worked reliably across a wide range of conditions. By 1945, over 4 million M1 Garands had been produced. Springfield Armory and Winchester manufactured them by the hundreds of thousands. The production process was refined to the point where parts were fully interchangeable. A damaged rifle could be repaired with components from any other M1. General George S. Patton famously called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. He wasn't exaggerating. In every theater of World War II, from the deserts of North Africa to the frozen forests of Belgium to the jungles of the Pacific, the M1 Garand gave American infantry a decisive edge in firepower, reliability, and combat effectiveness. By the time World War II ended in 1945, the M1 Garand had fundamentally changed infantry warfare. Other nations took notice. The Soviet Union, which had equipped its troops with the SVT-40 in limited numbers, ramped up production of self-loading rifles. The British, who had relied on the bolt-action Lee Enfield throughout the war, began developing their own semi-automatic designs. But the M1 Garand wasn't done. It served as the standard U.S. infantry rifle through the Korean War, where its reliability in extreme cold once again proved critical. At the chosen reservoir in 1950, Marines fighting in temperatures as low as -35 degrees Fahrenheit depended on their M1s to hold off waves of Chinese infantry. The rifle remained in frontline service until the early 1960s, when it was finally replaced by the M14, itself a derivative of the Garand's basic operating system. Even after being retired from U.S. military service, M1 Garands were provided to allied nations around the world. They saw combat in conflicts from Vietnam to the Middle East, often serving for decades after their original manufacture. Today, the M1 Garand is considered one of the most successful military firearms ever designed. It's prized by collectors, competed with in marksmanship competitions, and remains a symbol of American industrial and engineering prowess during World War II. But beyond the technical specifications and production numbers, the M1 Garand's true legacy lies in the soldiers who carried it. For the young Americans who stormed the beaches of Normandy, who fought through the frozen Ardennes, who island-hopped across the Pacific, the M1 Garand was more than just a weapon.
It was a tool of survival, a symbol of American industrial might, and a promise that when it mattered most, when their lives were on the line, their equipment would not fail them. German soldiers learned to fear it. Japanese defenders learned to respect it. And Allied forces learned they could depend on it. The rifle that was once mocked became the rifle that helped win the war. In the history of warfare, few weapons have had as profound an impact as the M1 Garand. It represented a fundamental shift in how infantry combat was conducted. Before the M1, firepower was concentrated in machine guns and artillery. Individual riflemen provided accuracy but limited volume of fire. The M1 Garand changed that calculation. It democratized firepower. It gave every soldier the ability to influence the battlefield in ways previously reserved for crew-served weapons. When Germany laughed at the American semi-automatic rifle, they made a critical miscalculation. They assumed that tradition and proven tactics would prevail over innovation. But war has always been decided by those who adapt fastest. And in World War II, the United States adapted by equipping its soldiers with a weapon that was ahead of its time. The M1 Garand didn't just break German lines, it broke the old paradigm of infantry warfare. And in doing so, it helped secure victory in the most consequential conflict in human history. This is the story of how an underestimated rifle became the most feared weapon in the hands of American infantry. A rifle that was mocked until it started winning battles. The M1 Garand, the rifle that changed everything.